Welcome to the Point. This week, an update and a look at the current legislative session in Lansing. First, from Grand Rapids Democratic Representative Kristen Grant. For scheduling purposes, this interview was recorded 10 days ago. Representative, let's talk a little bit about this session. I remember at the end of last year, you and I and the governor were standing here in Grand Rapids at some event, and I think it was about retirement taxes, if I remember, and I said to you, what do you want to do? You got so much done last year, meaning 2023. What do you expect to do in 2024? And you said something to the effect of, I don't want to slow down, I just want to keep going. And the first part of the session has been a little slower, and I'm going to explain this one more time, and I've said it a lot of times, but I think it bears repeating. 2 Democratic members of the House were elected to become mayors of their hometowns. And that took the 56-54 majority, made it 54-54. So in order to get anything done, it would take all of the Democrats and at least one Republican to get something passed. And so the big heavy lift stuff that you were doing first part of last year isn't happening, but special elections coming up. I don't predict elections. 2 very Democratic districts are likely to take you back to 56 to 54. So against that backdrop, tell me what the first part of the session has been like for you now versus as a freshman when you first came in last year in what was an unusual session, to be sure.
Yes. You know, I think that the first part of this session has really allowed people to dig into some issues that may have needed a little bit more work, a little bit more research, and a little bit more stakeholder engagement. So we, you know, came out of the gate running with things that Democrats have been talking about for a very long time. And then the question is, what is next? We had a lot of things primed up, but now there are some issues that are a little more systematic and need some deeper thought. And the first part of the session has allowed for that. And I've appreciated that time to do my homework.
And I've heard this from Republicans and Democrats, that they've had a chance to have hearings and listen to voices and have more stakeholders come in. The first part of the year, and not as a criticism, but as a practical matter, was a whirlwind. And sometimes the hearings were truncated, the number of people who testified was shortened because we're trying to get to so much stuff done in such a short period of time. But now understanding that you're not going to take up some of those bigger things perhaps until this majority is returned to Democrats, as we expect it to be, there has been a chance to hear those voices, and that's never a bad thing, is it?
No, it's not. It's been great to really have a chance to not just meet once or twice, but to meet multiple times, get down to the data, and get down to what is the real issue that we're trying to address when we have big systematic issues with the state that we're trying to dig into, such as housing or criminal justice reform and you know, auto no-fault reform, things like that that are not simple. They're not easy one-and-done conversations.
Yeah, particularly when you talk about auto no-fault. I've been covering politics in Michigan for about 30 years, and it was one of the first stories I ever did, and we're still doing those stories.
Yes.
But we're not going to get to that today. We are going to talk about something that I think is probably important to every one of your colleagues, almost without exception, and that is housing and the critical lack of affordable housing.
Yes.
It's not just urban areas, though you see it very much in Grand Rapids. It's in rural areas, it's everywhere. And I know that there has been some success, there's been some movement. Your colleague, Representative Snyder from Muskegon, is seeing 2 very big housing projects out on the lakeshore, which will, by a large percentile, increase the number of housing units there will be available. But it's necessary for that to happen over and over and over again. How do you do that? I mean, the governor talked about wanting to create 140,000 some kind of housing, but I never saw the budget line item for that, so I don't know exactly how that works. But how do you as a state representative work at that?
So serving as the chair on the housing subcommittee this year, we've really been digging into the multifaceted issue and where are the blocks? Why did we get here to a housing shortage, and what will help us, you know, move out of that? Last year we allocated a very significant amount of money to housing. But this is going to take more than just dollars, right? It really is a systematic issue, and housing doesn't go up overnight. So I've been working on a package with colleagues in my caucus and across the aisle that will look at the process that people are taking locally and on the state level to, approve housing and to get housing moving. There's a lot of red tape sometimes that not only slows down the process for housing, but increases the cost of housing astronomically. And because of that, that cost is passed down to the everyday person. And so these aren't the exciting things, but we start talking about planning, we start talking about zoning. I have introduced a bill that addresses the Michigan Enabling Act, and it talks about planning commissions and says that there should be someone there who has housing experience. And like you said, this isn't just an urban issue. So that bill has support from people in townships. It has support from our townships, but also MML and the municipalities, because everyone agrees, like, we should be looking at housing and being really intentional about it.
When I hear you talking about those things, I hear some of the same conversation I have with your Republican colleagues, and they're talking about one of the ways to break down some of the barriers is to help relax and or change regulations and some of that red tape you talked about. So I assume you're getting some Republican buy-in as you talk about this.
We do have support. I have support from colleagues on the Republican side. And the thing is that when you're building housing, if you go from county to county or municipality to municipality, and the rules are completely different, that means that it costs money and time to re-navigate the system. We have to make systems across the state mirror each other in certain aspects, so that builders and developers and nonprofits, everyone who's doing this housing work, can really be effective.
So you can take that literal blueprint,
yes,
and go from one county to the next city to the next township, and have it kind of all going in the same direction. We're going to run out of time quickly. Let's talk about another subject that's been around longer than I've been covering politics, and that is pay equity. It's
yes,
something that we've heard talked about perhaps since the mid to even early 60s. And I know it's something that you're interested in and working on. It's a heavy lift.
It is. I'm really excited to be a part of a package of 12 bills that was introduced just before we left for this break from session, and it talks about pay equity, and it basically has three parts to it. One, it allows for companies to be certified to say that they are providing equitable pay for their employees. It also requires them to educate their employees, so talk about what are your rights and how do you address them if your rights aren't being upheld. And then what my bill will do is allow people to report issues anonymously. Right now, you cannot make an anonymous report, and we know that a lot of people are not reporting because it's putting their livelihood at risk. And so really excited to address this. Women in Michigan are still making 84 cents on the dollar compared to men, and as we have more women being the head of households, this really is affecting not just the wage gap, but a wealth gap.
And how do you get compliance, I guess, is my question. How do you get an equal playing field and an equal paying field, and then have some way to monitor and enforce that?
Yeah, this is an ongoing conversation, and as people begin reporting more, we will have more data to look at, but there has to be systems that hold people accountable, and this is the start of that, to monitor. You can have differences based on education and experience, but gender or, race should not be a basis for there to be a difference in pay.
But that is the hard thing then, because you have to be able to compare your experience and my experience, yes, and they won't be the same.
They won't be the same.
And so then you have to attach a value to. I greatly appreciate and identify with what you're trying to do, but it does seem very complex.
It is complex. It's not simple, and I think that's the point that we're at, right, in yeah, the legislature, where we're tackling some hard problems, but we have to get started and start hearing input from stakeholders all over the place. And we do see other states addressing this issue, and they've been doing doing it for a while, so we have a lot to learn.
And again, you do have some time before you get back to full strength that you have those conversations, but not a lot, because those elections will happen this month. And
Next
then,
week, yeah.
yeah, right. And then the members will be sworn in sometime in, what, 2 or 3 weeks?
Yes.
And so then you get into kind of a sprint. You've got a 2-month period, a little over, the end of April, May, and June to get the budget done.
Yes.
And we've only got about a minute and a half left. I know some budget work has been done, but it's kind of normal budget timing to do it in May and June. But do you feel like all of the groundwork's been laid over the past 3 months to get ready for what's going to be a completely different budget cycle with a whole lot less money to spend?
Well, you know, there's a whole lot less money, so it will be shorter conversations this year for sure. And those conversations kept going. I know for myself, I learned a lot in my first budget cycle, and so immediately I hit the ground talking to community members and talking to organizations so that we could prepare. So I think a lot of my colleagues did that as well.
And I mean, the other thing is, because you already understand where some of those budgets are, where you were last year, you're probably going to be following some of that same roadmap, even in the State of the State and in her budget address. The governor didn't seem to deviate broadly from some of the things they talked about. Give me your impression these first 3 months. You said it's been different, it's been slower, you've had time to talk, time to listen. Are you ready now, as you were back in December, to get back to full speed?
I'm ready. We have a few bills that will be awaiting the governor's signature, and then I'm ready to introduce more and move a few new things. So excited about it.
Representative Luke Meerman is an Ottawa County Republican who was heavily involved in trying to improve school safety after the Oxford shootings. Even though a significant amount of time has passed since that tragedy, he is still hopeful that changes can be implemented. Representative, let's talk a little bit about what's going on in Lansing, or what isn't going on in Lansing. For the past 3 months, it has been a relatively slow session. And if you compare it to last year and the flurry of activity that was going on, it's been an extremely slow session. Part of that's because the legislature, the House, is at a 54-54 tie because a couple of Democrats took other offices. That's probably going to change later this month, and by the end of the month, I presume Democrats will be back to a 56-54. But what's it been like these first few months, particularly if you compare it to last year?
Yeah, well, you know, from our perspective, my perspective as a Republican, you know, 54-54 means that we need to work together, and we need to find things that both parties want to get passed. And it's been a trial, a struggle, really, I think, these last 3 months. I guess I would have expected more true bipartisan things to happen. And we did get some stuff done, but at the end of the day, it's been kind of a stalemate. And next Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, they're waiting for election results to happen, and then we'll find out if you know, Republicans happen to win one of those seats, or if Democrats get both those seats, it'll go back to kind of how it was last year.
And for clarity, we are taping this in advance, so that vote will have already taken place by the time this airs, and we'll know. But looking at it, and again, I've had to explain this. In fact, I explained it to the other segment of this show, that I don't make predictions about elections, but those are two pretty Democratic districts.
They are.
And
yep, they are.
And so it looks as though you're about to get to that 56-54. What does that mean then going forward? Because I would assume that one of the first items of business is going to be getting work on the budget, because you've got to have that done in just over 2 months.
Yeah, I think the budget will be really kind of all-consuming, as it normally is, but it's condensed down at least by a month this time. So, yes, budget will take all the air out of the room for a couple months.
And this year's budgeting process is going to be different than last year's budgeting process for a number of reasons. Chief among them is there's not that big government surplus that was sitting over there that was kind of woven in with the budget last year. Does that make it easier or harder?
I've heard people argue both ways. And, you know, obviously we can't keep spending our grandkids' money like we did last year. It's just not possible. And this inflation pressure that we're seeing has got a lot to do with that spending that's gone on over the last 2 or 3 years. I think in some ways it makes it a little simpler because you just have to say we don't have the money. I see our governor, and I'm most concerned, I think, about her desire to go into the teacher's pension fund and pull out $680-some million out of that, and we've historically underfunded that, and that's a state constitution responsibility that we have as taxpayers and as the legislature to fund that pension system. So I would hope that doesn't happen. That's one of my goals of trying to stop.
And I assume, and I haven't spoken to anybody directly, but I assume that there will be some Democrats that will have a problem with that as well, as supporters of teachers' unions and of unions in general, and having that pension fund fully funded. But the problem is, will there be enough that they can go kind of against the will of the governor? Because that hasn't been something they've done in the first year, at least.
No, it hasn't, and we see that. I think there's a lot of heartburn on the Democratic side over the governor's, what you could call as a Green New Deal plan. In the Senate especially, my counterparts over there were telling me there's no way this passes through the Senate, and it did. And even in the House, we thought there was 2 or 3 holdouts that would not vote for that, and thereby, keep it from happening. But yeah, the governor found the leverage and found the pressure points she needed, and she made it happen.
And just to refresh people's mind, that is a plan to have the state of Michigan using entirely renewable energy by 2040, is that right?
Yeah, 2040, and really using technology that we don't have, relying on technology we don't have for the gas generation electricity. Carbon sequestering 90% of that carbon coming out of a gas generation plant. It doesn't hardly exist now. It's really unattainable, and unfortunately, I think it's going to cost us all a lot more by the time we figure out this isn't going to work.
Let's talk a little bit about what happens as we move forward with other types of legislation, something that you were heavily involved in after that horrific school shooting here in Michigan, was a committee to look at what you could do to improve safety at schools. And it was, if I recall, a bipartisan effort to get people together and talk about that. You came out with a report. Refresh me as to what was in some of that report and what your focus was as you were looking at that.
Yeah, so way back to between Christmas and New Year's of 2021, we had our first meeting as a task force. We were put together by Speaker Wentworth to see what we could come up with for changes we thought should happen on the school safety front. And so there was 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans, and we met throughout that spring and really had a report pretty close to being done by that early summer. And we got 8 signatures on it just before session ended of 2022. So 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans signed the School Safety Task Force report that we put out. And so we weren't looking to investigate Oxford. We were looking to talk to experts and people on the ground. What should be done? How should we be doing this differently?
Yeah. Right.
So we looked at, part of the bill package that we have deals with okay to say. Part of the bill package has to do with training for risk police officers in the school and school personnel in general, and School Safety Commission. So I'm pretty excited about that package. There was a lot of time and effort that went into that, and I think if you look around the nation, we've got some stuff on the table that could make us be really a leader in the nation. Now we just have to get it across the finish line.
But as you point out, that was done in 2022. It's now 2024. That's been almost 2 years since that report was done. And so far, nothing's happening with it in this legislature. Is there any realistic potential that something might go with it this year?
So there was a hearing about 3 weeks ago on 5 of the bills. And so my hope is that we'll get a hearing on the other bills as well. I've got a conversation happening with my counterpart, Democrat Representative Breen, in just an hour. You know, we're going to talk about what might happen and how we can get the rest of that package moving. I guess for me, it has been an extremely frustrating time to watch all that's been going on in the state of Michigan, in Lansing particularly, throughout 2023, and to watch these bills sit here and wait. And there's an argument to be made that, you know, changes need to be made to these bills, but I would make the argument that you often have to start moving things forward and before everybody comes to the table and gives you the changes they're looking for. And so scheduling hearings, Speaker Tate, you know, letting people know we're going to move this package, all of a sudden things will come together. The people that need to give their input into the package and suggest the changes, they'll be at the table. They'll be ready to go because they see, you know, it's going to move. So it's been extremely frustrating for me to watch the things that really the Democrats worked on last year before this package.
But as you say, you now had hearings on at
Yep.
least 5 of those bills, and that is a first big major
Yep.
step. So it's something that we'll continue to watch and follow as the weeks and months play out. But part of the problem you may be up against there in the next 2 months, again, is what we just talked about, is
budget,
with the
yeah.
budget. And as you say, it takes all the air out of the room for a while. And this year, perhaps, maybe more than other years because of the truncated amount of time. Let's talk about one more thing in the time that we have left. And this is something I hadn't really thought about, but it's something that you pointed out to me is happening in other states in the country. And it's trying to make it easier, not automatic, easier for people who are certified as doctors in a foreign country to come to Michigan and make it simpler, perhaps faster, for them to be accredited here. And we know that in the healthcare as a whole, we're constantly hearing about the strains on healthcare and the lack of folks, because as more and more of us get older and older, the demand on healthcare is more and more. So tell me how this would work.
Yeah, what we're looking to is to make Michigan a place where somebody who has a doctor's license from another country who's looking to immigrate to the United States, to make Michigan a place where, listen, you know, I could be practicing as a doctor within, you know, 6 months, 8 months, and be fully licensed. And we're looking at, you know, countries that have medical schools on par with ours. You know, so it's not just an open door for anyone with a medical license. But yeah, other states are doing it. These people have been practicing in other countries that, like I said, have you know, medical standards to ours. And we should be a place, a state, where it's very appealing to come and be a doctor.
And they'd still have to go through testing and making sure that they, as you point out, were on a par with the education that doctors receive.
Yeah, they don't just walk in and start practicing. They still have to take our exams here. Yeah.
But you could cut that time down by several months, maybe maybe a year.
Over a year, I would say, yeah.
A year sooner than they might otherwise be able to do it. Where is that? Talking stages, or is it already?
Bills have been introduced. Representative Farhat and myself have introduced bills.
So a bipartisan bill.
Puri also has some bills on that, and Senator Chang in the Senate is working on it. And if you look across the nation to see which states are doing it, it doesn't matter. It's red, blue, either side. So I'm excited. My counterparts as well, Democrats, are very excited that this is something we could pull across the finish line.
The legislature is about to enter into a somewhat shortened budget period with the goal of having a new spending plan in place by July 1st. That will be the biggest issue on the to-do list in Lansing before adjourning for the summer for what will be a very active campaign season. The balance of power in the State House will be up for grabs, along with an open U.S. Senate seat and all congressional seats up for a vote. Oh, and yes, the battle for the White House, too. We'll cover it all here, To the Point.